The only eligible source of funds for this would be the general fund, which is why we identified the UB reserve for mid-year adjustments. And I would defer any substantive questions to BOE or the mayor's office. If they're there.
Is the mayor's office here? There may be some questions. I'm sensing there might be questions for the mayor's office. This is a contract that we have very little information on that was entered into by the mayor's office. And so it might be helpful to have someone from the mayor's office here. I can get started though. I have some questions for the CAO. I know that the CAO believes that the costs aren't eligible for FEMA reimbursement. However, given the unprecedented nature of the fire and Washington's pledge to support us, can you help us understand why we're not even trying to submit this for reimbursement? It seems like it's directly related to reconstruction and fire recovery.
I don't have more information than what is written in the report. Essentially, this is not, we evaluated the work related to FEMA's eligible public assistance eligibility requirement, and this did not meet any of the approved damaged inventory items that FEMA had identified that we could request for reimbursement.
Okay. Is the entire $8 million required in this fiscal year? And if not, can the expanded scope be added at a later date when funding may be budgeted next year as opposed to drawing in the reserve fund now?
My understanding is that a significant amount of the work has been completed, although there may be a portion of the scope which I would defer to BOE or the mayor's office that may not have been completed yet.
I'll chime in real quickly. Alfred Mata from the Bureau of Engineering. Just to add on to what Jacob said, most of the work will be done this fiscal year. There might be some work that extends into next fiscal year, but the vast majority of it is underway and trying to get done in the early part of 2026.
And I have a couple of questions for you, for BOE. What authority did BOE have to authorize AECOM to proceed with work when the funding for the subtask A scope of services, both the original and expanded scope, hadn't yet been identified?
We did not have the funding, so we went through the selection process, the task order process, in parallel with this funding process. We awarded the task order through our Board of Public Works with the contract ceiling amount, but we have only authorized funding that we had available within our department account up to $450,000 up to date.
But you're saying that a lot of the work has already been done on an $8 million contract?
Due to the urgent need and desire to provide these services to the community, AECOM has proceeded at risk to perform these services.
But now we don't have a choice. I mean, my real concern is what oversight is being exercised by BOE. What are you currently doing to oversee this contract and make sure that it's staying within a very large budget? What does that look like?
We are working very closely with the mayor's office and with AECOM. We have weekly meetings, we have weekly reports with them. They're very involved in attending community meetings, which we receive reports on. They are meeting with all the city departments that are involved with recovery and the various recovery planning efforts that they're working on. So we're very closely working with them on monitoring their efforts.
What work product has been finalized and is readily available for the public to see how this $8 million has been spent?
At the moment, nothing has been finalized. There are draft reports that are currently under review by city departments. I believe we're expecting comments tomorrow. We're working through those with the mayor's office. And 2 weeks ago at the ad hoc committee on fire recovery, we agreed with the council office to deliver or meet with them and review the drafts at the end of next week, I think the schedule is. And then following that, we'll work to finalize those and distribute those publicly.
Just one more question, and then colleagues will turn it over. Does the infrastructure restoration plan that's included as part of the original scope under subtask A include the restoration of LADWP-owned assets or other assets that may be reimbursed with special funds? Is there any way to not have all of this come from the general fund?
It will cover and address the planning that DWP is doing to do the undergrounding. I don't know the second part of that question, if there was a way. I know the CAO has weighed in that they didn't feel that these expenditures were eligible for reimbursement.
By DWP?
No, no.
I asked about FEMA. This is a DWP question. Can DWP special funds be used to supplement some piece of this and cover the cost of the DWP-related planning? Because it seems to me that a lot of the planning, or at least some of the planning, is going to inure to the benefit of DWP. And so perhaps they can pay for that pro rata share of the work, so it's not coming out of our general fund.
That's something that I think we could talk and discuss with the CAO to see if that's a possibility. I don't think we've
That would be great,
explored that
because
yet.
I mean, I don't want to authorize the full amount, and then they say, no, actually, we're not going to pay for any of it, if it is in fact something that's a DWP expense. Colleagues, questions? Councilmember Blumenfield.
Great, thank you. I mean, I have the same frustration as you. It's hard to say no to something that we've already done or we're already doing. And it's also, there's not a lot of detail on what this money is really going to, but the general topic areas that I see here look remarkably familiar. They look like things that were on the Hagerty contract. So my question is, if we had done these things during the first 180 days, would they have been FEMA reimbursable? If we had done it, using extra staff and all the things that we were able to do during that first time?
I would defer to the CAO or to someone else to address that question. I'm not sure if that would, I don't know enough about the FEMA reimbursement process to know the answer
I
to
just
that
know
question.
there was a lot that we were going to do real quick in the first 180 days because all these things were covered and we could hire infinite amounts of contractors as long as they were above and beyond our staff to do things. And I remember these topics, the fire protection plan, infrastructure. I mean, I don't know if it's with the exact words, but they all look very familiar to me to what those early contracts were about. And I was under the impression that they were part of the original contract. And that was we was going back and forth back then between AECOM and Hagerty, and we were in a room with both parties. And so I guess I don't understand enough about what this is going to, and is it substantially different? If we had done this early, would we have actually been able to get it covered? Maybe there's not an answer to that. I don't know. I don't know. You can't really say no to this, but at the same time, I don't really know what this is for.
I will add that my understanding is that the work that you're talking about that was reportedly part of Hagerty's scope was not performed. So anything that was done, that was thought to be done under that contract is maybe being done under this task order, but it was not performed under that contract, so I understand. But the Bureau of Engineering didn't have any involvement with the Hagerty scope
If it had been
of work.
performed, would it have been covered?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Because it's an $8 million question. Can you get back to me on that?
I see that the deputy mayor is here and is interested in joining us at the table. So welcome, Deputy Mayor.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor Anna Hovasapian, and I will be joined shortly by Deputy Mayor Rachel Freeman from our Business and Economic Development team. So as the general manager is right, the Hagerty's focus was on the soil remediation work. They did not do any of this work. Our understanding from the conversations we've had with CAO is it's not when this work was done, it's the scope of the work. And so because the scope focuses on more than just the public infrastructure, that it is not reimbursable. The fire protection plan is not just looking at the fire protection plan for the roads that the city owns. It's looking at the fire protection plan for the whole region and trying to develop how we would build back more resilient. And as a result, we are looking at homes that are privately owned and trying to think through resiliency across the board. And therefore, it's things like that that we have been, from the mayor's office, have heard from CAO that makes the scope of the work not reimbursable rather than when this work was done or not done.
So there may have been, just to clarify, there may have been work in there that could have been reimbursable, but because there were parts that went outside of the scope of what is reimbursable, the entire thing is not reimbursable, and there was no way to sort of bifurcate it out and have two contracts so that we could have the stuff that would be reimbursable separate from the scope that's outside of the scope. I mean, that's not what happened, but I just want to understand why the whole thing is not reimbursable.
I mean, I think from our offices, from the mayor's office perspective, we would say that we should submit this to FEMA and seek reimbursement on the parts that can be. That's what we're going to work towards on our end, and not just, exclude it from the conversation. So it may be that pieces of this potentially are FEMA reimbursable. We're relying on the expertise that's available to us, and so that's why we can't, at this point, we cannot say to AECOM, we'll pay you when we get reimbursed. They're doing the work that needs to be done for the rebuilding of the Palisades. We're hoping to move forward and then seek reimbursement where we can, or seek other sorts of fund, whether that be from state or federal government, so that we can get the money back. It's not, from our end, it's not sort of done that we're going to pay for this and walk away. We are going to seek reimbursement.
Hi, and just to add to that briefly, I think, FEMA will reimburse to the conditions prior to the date of the disaster. And so, as you can imagine, it's more challenging than just a simple bifurcation of the scope of work, because as you seek to develop plans with an eye towards future resiliency and long-term resiliency, much of that planning is deeply linked.
Okay. Councilmember Blumenfield.
So, it says infrastructure restoration plan. How is that not, how does that go beyond? That sounds like, the word restoration means bringing it back, not going beyond.
Sure. So when we look at the sort of overall horizontal infrastructure, which there are many facets, I'll just give one example. I know that DWP is looking at undergrounding and exploring that, and the undergrounding of power utility would be something which is, through an eye towards resiliency, but would not be sort of restoring it to the prior conditions.
Right, the actual work, but the plan itself, I guess. I guess there's, obviously you're not putting back exactly what was there, obviously. And if you're going underground, that's very different than being, over the top. But I would imagine that some portion of that, but I guess you'll find out. We'll submit it. And, I guess the other question, was Hagerty, is there a reason that Hagerty didn't do some of this stuff? Were they supposed to have?
I think, I'll let sort of, the BO team speak to that in terms of their selection process for AECOM from the task order. But I think, AECOM is one of the premier global engineering firms that has done a lot of work within the city and internationally on infrastructure planning and design. I know that BOE had gone through a thoughtful selection process through that. So I'll let Alfred and the team speak to that in more depth.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to choose one or the other. I just thought it was originally their scope, and now that they didn't do it, and so now we're having sort of the backup team or the second team come in and do it.
I'll turn it over to Alfred in a second. I think they sort of focused on the debris removal process and staffing the task forces, and that process alone sort of required a lot more assistance and support. And so that's really the work that they were focused on doing. And as we looked at some of these additional scopes, we wanted to explore what else would be available to the city. And so, that's when BOE moved forward with this scope of work and additional services needed. But it's not duplicative work of things that Hagerty has worked on. They have not, and their contract is close to concluding with EMD. As they wrap up the debris removal process, they're not expanding the scope to work on anything else.
Colleagues, any more questions? Councilmember McCosker?
Thanks very much, especially the mayor's office, for being here and addressing this. The circumstances, as I understand it, are that given the nature of the emergency order, we put AECOM on the bench, if you will, the bench to be able to provide services. As we move forward, the city, developed a scope of services, and some money was spent that was immediately available, and now the request is to get funding from the UB to fund this full project at $8 million. Just to get a little context, if these are soft costs, talking like a developer, if these are soft costs, what do you think is the value of what the built plans will be in the end? What's the ratio of investment? $8 million for these plans to build out roughly a magnitude of how many dollars of public and private improvements?
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember. I would say that the overall project costs for the various infrastructure projects is still under development. I can share with you that at a minimum, if we're to look at the CAO's office and the applications that they've submitted for FEMA reimbursement, that totals just north of $1.5 billion. So I would say it is only north of $1.5 billion in terms of the actual physical work that needs to be completed for the overall infrastructure.
So while it's very painful because it's a lot of money, it's $8 million to plan for hopefully the very functional, effective, build back better, if you will, if it's more resilient, for at least $1.5 billion worth of infrastructure.
Isn't
That's
it by
correct.
definition not that? Maybe I misunderstood it, that the 8 million is to leverage things beyond what's reimbursable, right? Because if this is all, the stuff that we've been reimbursed for is not part of this plan. What we're paying for is you said, the undergrounding and the things that are not reimbursable. So it's beyond the 1.5 billion that we've already spent, or that we're seeking reimbursement for, is independent of all this. Is that right?
I think what I was suggesting was that I think we recognize that there's been billions of dollars of infrastructure damage that's been done, and the calculation that we have to date, at least, is just a reflection of what the CAO and through the IEM contract has been able to articulate, and that is at $1.5 billion. We recognize that there are still a number of projects that have yet to be have formal cost estimation associated, so it'd only be north of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet you the amount that we're going to be trying to get is going to be more than that. When you start talking about undergrounding wires and all of that, it's way north of that.
I have a follow-up question to Mr. McCosker's question. So what are we getting for the $8 million? Are we getting detailed infrastructure plans, or are we getting reports that will require additional work, either by AECOM or our departments? What exactly are we getting?
We are not getting detailed construction plans, I think is what your question is. We're getting the things we've talked about, the infrastructure registration plan, the fire protection plan, logistics.
And what does that mean, a fire protection plan? Is that like a 20-page report that makes suggestions about using, fire-resistant materials in construction, or is it something different than that? Because none of us have seen this report, or any of them.
Correct. Yes, it will detail fire protection plans, prevention mitigation measures as far as rebuilding structures in the hillsides, the management of vegetation in the hillsides, the firefighting water supply. We'll look at that and make recommendations for the plan to build that out so that supports future firefighting needs. It'll look at emergency access improvements and enhancements that are needed, evacuation planning, all those types of things will be included in the fire protection plan.
And are these general recommendations that we can use citywide across our hillside communities? Because I would say most council districts have hillside communities within high fire severity zones, or are these recommendations sort of specific to the Palisades because they do things like talk about exit routes in specific streets?
I think it'll be both. I think it'll be specific to the Palisades with the ideas that it could be expanded to the rest of the city.
Correct. So I think there are general best practices, but the AECOM team is going to be looking at roadways. You've got a very landlocked community within the Pacific Palisades, and looking at existing roadways through, the roadway restoration process. Potentially, there are, road widening recommendations that are going to be made. How does that support the ingress and egress of that community under, emergency disaster circumstances? So it will be very Palisades specific, though I'm sure there are best practices that can be considered citywide.
And how is the timing of this going to work when you have homeowners already filing for permits to rebuild? I mean, if we're talking about road widenings, we're looking at potentially, street easement expanding the right-of-way. That might involve eminent domain. How are we thinking about the fact that we have people moving forward and we're encouraging people to move forward with redevelopment as quickly as possible, while we're talking about infrastructure that may be negatively impacted or be precluded from taking effect because we're encouraging people to move forward on the development side? How are these things working in concert rather than potentially in conflict? Or even worse, where they're redundant, or not redundant, where it's no longer a useful tool because you have one house on a block that you would like to widen the street, but someone's already pulled their permit to rebuild their house. How is that coordinated? And if it's
Sure.
not, can we think about making sure that we're all being thoughtful in terms of the rebuild?
I think what's critical, one is that, AECom is kept on track to continue to deliver these work streams within an expeditious fashion so that the city departments, with their expertise, can do not only their evaluation, but, make the formal recommendations to the city family on sort of key decisions and what some of those trade-offs would be.
Okay. You look like you have a question, Mr. McCosker.
So if we didn't go out to AECom, is this work that would be done in-house by BOE?
A lot of this work is technical and specialized in nature. The BOE hasn't worked in fire recovery and fire planning in the past, so we really thought the need to bring in outside experts that have that expertise.
So it's a level of expertise, and I would also imagine that it's a workload issue.
It would definitely be a workload. If we did have the expertise, we definitely have a full plate and then some of work for the staffing levels that we have, so it would be a challenge to do this with in-house staff.
So even if we told you you had to do it yourself, you probably couldn't cover all the work. I would imagine you'd be pulling people out of San Pedro and Watts and sending them up to the Palisades to do this work.
That's correct, yes.
It's a lot of money, but I feel like there are so many moving parts. Doing such a massive public and private infrastructure project, rebuilding a city, is really something that, fortunately doesn't happen very often. Unfortunately, it has to happen here. And you do call in a firm like AECom to do the work. And my sense is that, colleagues, is that the investment is worth it. I mean, there's probably a lot of moving parts that haven't been articulated here because we can't even imagine what they are. But haul routes and construction routes and trying to function as a partial city while all of this work is going on, and to build it back in a way where this never happens again, probably requires a level of expertise that we will benefit from. Unfortunately, it's just very expensive. So I'll be voting to approve this.
Any more questions? Otherwise, I have a quick friendly amendment, I think. So I'd like us to try to secure FEMA and DWP reimbursement. And on the DWP side, it's just for DWP's sort of share of this planning that is sort of being done to their benefit. I understand there are categories established, but I would like for us to try. If the federal government won't make us whole, I want that on the record. So I would propose we add that as a fourth direction to an amended ad hoc committee report, and it should read, request the CAO pursue FEMA and DWP reimbursement and report back to the council with details on what has been submitted and recovered prior to the end of the fiscal year.
Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, I move that we concur with the ad hoc committee for LA recovery report as amended. They considered this item on November 17th, 2025. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Councilmember Yoslowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Aye.
Councilmember Hyde.
Yes.
Councilmember McCosker.
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez. Yes. This item is approved as amended.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. We're going to move now to item 15. Mr. Wexler, would you please read the item?
Item 15, motion Park Harris Dawson relative to requesting the city attorney to provide an analysis of the proposal detailed in Mayor Karen Bass's request to the City Council issued in a letter dated October 9th, 2025 regarding the feasibility of granting the Director of Finance and the Office of Finance increased delegated authority to promulgate rules that grant a one-time measure ULA tax exemption to owners of all residential properties in the Pacific Palisades that were destroyed in the Palisades fire and related matters.
So I have one question. This might be for the city attorney's office. What authority does the council or the mayor have to suspend Measure ULA taxes on certain sales geographically? And I guess the more specific question is, did the ballot initiative include any language related to granting the council or mayor authority to make amendments to the Measure ULA requirements? Or do we think that there's language somewhere in there that we can use to bootstrap in this exception?
Good afternoon, Adrian Coruscani, City Attorney's Office. That is actually what we'd be looking at in the measure, because the measure was specific to certain exclusions, but we're waiting to see what the full scope of the council's request is so we can conduct a full analysis to see whether there is any language or room in the language to consider exclusions.
So did you, if we were to vote yes today and concur with the Public Works and Rules, Elections, and Intergovernmental Relations Committees to approve the motion, would that still give you the flexibility you need to go back and look and make sure we can do this legally before we
Yes.
step in it?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I believe that the motion is specific on feasibility, and then, if feasible, to come back with an ordinance.
Okay, colleagues, any questions on this? Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. 2 questions. Number 1, how much money could be eligible for refunds based on this motion? Is there any preliminary analysis on this already?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if the Office of Finance has any rough numbers, but I'm not aware of any of the actual numbers being crunched at this time.
Great, thank you. And then considering ULA is a documentary transfer tax, how does this impact rebuilding for residents who have had their homes burned down? They still own the property, correct? Would there be a tax related to ULA and rebuilding if they aren't buying or selling the property?
Again, I wouldn't be able to answer that here, but if that is something you'd like us to also look into and work with the Department of Finance and any other departments, we can add that to the analysis.
Great, yes, I would, please, thank you, for both of the items. If there's any preliminary numbers you can share with us. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So just to clarify, the question is, if you're just rebuilding your home and you're not selling your property, would it trigger the documentary transfer tax? It seems like the answer is clearly no, but,
I would think, but if the question is specific to also the numbers aspect of it, I don't have that information yet, so.
what do you mean by the numbers aspect?
I think there was a 2-part question
Okay.
as well, so, yeah,
Oh,
we
what the
can,
implication of the amount, like what we're talking about?
correct.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to clarify. Okay,
No, that's good. That answers my second question.
okay, just the first part has not been answered. Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. Colleagues? Questions? Councilmember Blumenfield.
Be interesting to see how what the feasibility is, because a while back I was looking into this very question with the city attorney about, before the fires, about, I had a couple of nonprofits in my district that wanted to sell some land and then use the proceeds to build permanent affordable, permanent housing. It was the motion picture home and Jewish Home for the Aging. And we went back and forth, and I was told in no uncertain terms that you cannot do that change without a vote without going back to the voters. So I don't understand how this would be different, but maybe there's something, maybe when I ask the question, I get one answer, but when the mayor and everybody else asks the question, we're gonna get a different answer. So I'd like to shoehorn my initial question into this as well and say, as long as we're requesting the feasibility of this, let's also request the feasibility of getting a report back on the process to initiate a Measure ULA tax exemption, and whether it could also be used to assist nonprofits who are selling their land for the purpose of building affordable housing. Just a report back, but it seems like it's the same kind of question, and maybe we get a different answer by the way that we're asking, but if we do, I want the answer to apply to both things.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay. Seeing none, I move that we, do you want to make that a formal amendment, or you just, okay.
A formal amendment.
Okay. I move that we concur with the Public Works and Rules, Elections, and Intergovernmental Relations Committees to approve the motion as amended by Councilmember Blumenfield. Please call the roll.
Madam Chair, for the record, this item was considered by the Ad hoc Committee for LA Recovery. Councilmember Yaroslavsky.
Yes.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Aye?
Councilmember Hutt. Yes. Councilmember McCosker. Yes. Councilmember Hernandez. Yes. 5 ayes. This item is approved as amended.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to move now to item 17. I'd like to ask the Department of Transportation to please come up to present.
Item number 17 is a joint City Administrative Officer and Los Angeles Department of Transportation report relative to an independent evaluation of the Vision Zero program and a revised LADOT Vision Zero evaluation and safety plan. This item is referred to the Transportation Committee, Public Safety Committee, and Budget and Finance Committee. The Transportation Committee amended the item on August 13, 2025. The Public Safety Committee concurred with the Transportation Committee's action on November 12, 2025.
Thank you. So can we get a very brief presentation on this? Not the entire thing, just a quick overview where we are.
Sure, happy to do that. Tom Carranza, Assistant General Manager with LADOT. Joining me today are Yolanda Chavez from the Office of the CAO and Chris Ryder from LADOT. We will co-present the results and recommendations of 2 recent evaluations of the city's Vision Zero program. Just providing some high-level background, in August 2015, Mayor Garcetti issued Executive Directive 10, establishing the city's Vision Zero program, an initiative to reduce traffic fatalities. The stated goals of ED 10 were to reduce traffic fatalities citywide by 20% by 2017 compared to 2016, with an emphasis on prioritizing pedestrian fatalities amongst children and older adults. And the second goal was to reduce traffic fatalities citywide to 0 by 2025. In 2016, LADOT found that 65% of all severe and fatal collisions occur on 6% of city streets, which represent about 500 miles. These streets became the High Engineering Network, which we also refer to as the HIN. The HIN was later refined to include 71 priority corridors and 90 priority intersections that account for the majority of traffic fatalities involving people walking and biking. As part of the Vision Zero initiative, LADOT has installed more than 7,000 individual treatments on the HIN, redesigned nearly 20 miles of HIN streets, and collaborated with the Department of Public Works to deliver 4 complete streets projects with 2 additional projects currently in the construction phase. With that high-level overview of the program, I'll turn it over now to my colleague from the CAO.
Hi, good afternoon, Yolanda Chavez with the CAO. I'm also joined by Sylvie McCune with the CAO. Thank you. I'll be brief with our slides because I know this is a long presentation, but just for background, as you all know, Vision Zero has been in place for over nine years at this point. The city has allocated $334 million. That's from fiscal year 16-17 when it was initiated to the current fiscal year. And yet, unfortunately, there has been little reduction in traffic deaths. In fact, in 2023, there was an average of 1 traffic death per day. So in fiscal year 22-23, the CAO was allocated funding to conduct an independent evaluation of the Vision Zero program's first 7 years. KPMG was contracted for the study. At around the same time, DOT launched its own study on the effectiveness of individual transportation projects and hired Fear and Pierce through a grant they received. And this study analyzed collision data for 5 years, 2017 through 2021. The next 2 slides, and I'll be very brief with these 2, are really the data on all fatalities and fatalities and serious injuries. All this data was compiled by KPMG through the statewide integrated traffic records system. I think one of the key things to note is that, as you can see in the first graph, the first slide there, which is slide 11, since 2016-17, really all fatalities has remained flat or increased slightly. There is some data from 2024 that has not been validated yet, which shows some improvement, where deaths went down to 302, but again, not much improvement. The key point on the next slide is that the result of, responsible parties for the violations that caused death or serious injuries, out of the 88% of these traffic violations, 40% were caused by drivers and 48% by pedestrians. The other 12% in terms of violations are unknown. So either driver mistakes, pedestrian mistakes. So that's the data that was found, again, through the statewide integrated system. The next slide, again, outlines the budget for Vision Zero, the annual funding from fiscal year 2015-16 through the present. Let me just focus on the next two slides, which are really the core of the findings from this independent evaluation by KPMG.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
On slide 14, it shows the overall budget, but we know that labor costs and other costs have gone up, material costs. Do you have information on like what this has bought us, and if like we're increasing the number of speed humps every year we're putting in? I mean, I know the answer is no, but like what does this 41 million buy us versus what 30 million in 2018 bought us? And are we spending less? Are we getting less and less every year for the money that we're putting in? And like, what did this buy us?
We do have a very detailed chart that tells you exactly how the money was allocated, and so we could definitely share that with
Can you just talk in large? Is it speed humps, bumpers, like
Sure.
what?
Yes. Let
Just
me have
in like
Selena
two
just go
sentences,
through
like
the
where is it
major-
going?
So majority of the funding is allocated toward projects, and a small portion of the $41 million is allocated for staffing across for DOT as well as the Public Works Department.
And we're talking about, can you speak into the mic, just bring it a little closer?
Yeah.
So it's going to projects and a little bit for staff? And are
Correct.
these, are these sort of traffic calming measures? What are we talking about
Yeah,
here?
a large portion is for traffic lights, traffic signals, and also for large capital projects, corridor improvements.
Okay.
So DOT can also provide more details about the funding for those.
I think that's enough for purposes for this conversation, but
Sure.
thank you.
And we'll be more than happy to share this chart we have that's very detailed with all the funding. In terms of the findings, KPMG really found that part of the challenge was the imbalance in the really 4 areas that are supposed to be prioritized under a Vision Zero program, which include education, enforcement, engineering, and evaluation. The other key findings, of course, in terms of the decline in the effectiveness of the programs had to do with the lack, again, of a balanced approach, where most of the funding was allocated to engineering and not the other 3 E's. The lack of clear governance of the citywide program in terms of no clear lead, in terms of whether DOT should be the lead. There were co-leads, and then in the end, no clear lead. The other key finding was that the tools to monitor and manage the program were not implemented. And finally, because of all of that, there was a decline in participation by the key stakeholders, which are all the departments that need to contribute to a Vision Zero program. And with that, I will turn over to my colleagues, DOT colleagues, so they could discuss the Fear and Peer study. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. I'm Chris Ryder. I'm a senior transportation engineer on our Vision Zero program. I'm going to walk you through a quick highlights of the Vision Zero safety study. This was a work that we did between 2022 and 2024 with the consultant Fear and Peers. This was targeted at updating our safety study for the Vision Zero program within LADOT and looking at evaluations within some of the projects we did. So it was kind of a parallel and complement to the work that CAO did and reported on. So if you look at slides 19 and 20, just to kind of give you the quick hits, they show you a progression of the types of crashes that have increased over the years. And the big picture story that these 2 slides tell is highlighted on slide 20, which is that there's been an increase in PED collisions and PED collisions resulting in fatal or severe outcomes, while vehicle-to-vehicle crashes have actually declined and the severe outcomes have declined. So it is essentially getting safer to drive in LA, and similar story across the country, but it is getting less safe to be a pedestrian due to many factors. On slide 21, we show again a little bit about the breakdown in terms of the mode share of how people may commute versus the number of crashes. And again, you can see that pedestrian is far outweighed in terms of how many people primarily travel on foot as their commute versus the collisions that occur. On slide 22, highlights what the most common violation types that are reported by LAPD are for different modes, and one of the highlights is that speed pops up the most. But one interesting thing here is that speed is actually underrepresented, because when it comes to pedestrian collisions, those primary collision factors are usually attributed to whether the pedestrian had the right-of-way or whether the right-of-way was violated. If speed was a factor, it's not the primary factor. So a lot of those pedestrian incidents do involve speed, yet it's not reported in the numbers. Slide 23 highlights that 37% occurred while a pedestrian was crossing in a crosswalk, 37% occurred while a pedestrian was crossing outside of a crosswalk. Recent changes to state law makes that distinction not as important, as there's the right to walk bill that makes jaywalking a much more rare offense. And so there is no big difference as to the vulnerability of a pedestrian based on where they are crossing. Slide 23 takes a quick look and highlights how equity plays into this factor, and that in the there is a disproportionate share amongst the highest impacted equity through the Community Health and Equity Index. On slides 25 and 26, we get into the data that we received to update what we previously referred to as the high injury network. We're updating that language to reflect the priority safety corridors. And then we also have a larger set of safety corridors that's in accordance with updated state laws that uses that as a technical term. So we're still able to focus on what we previously called the high injury network, while also being able to broaden our approach for grants or other opportunities that are governed by the state code. On page 27 is just a brief overview of the safe systems approach. This is a newer best practice that complements and is a part of the Vision Zero approach. And what it really talks about is that mistakes will happen on the roadway, but the idea is to build the roadway in such a way that it can forgive mistakes. They don't have to lead to fatality or life-changing injuries. And then on slides 29 and 30, to finish out the Fair and Pierce study, we have a quick highlight of some corridors that we did evaluations on. We show that where we've been able to do really large projects and large amounts of work, we have seen results. On page 30 is a quick highlight of some very pedestrian-focused improvements we made, such as pedestrian hybrid beacons, signals that are specified for pedestrian crossing, leading pedestrian intervals, and then left turn signal phasing and how adding safer left turns impacts pedestrian safety citywide. And so now I'm going to segue into the next steps as some of the recommendations from the council report. So on slide 32, it talks about updating the 2018 action plan, providing quarterly reports to the ED9 subcommittee, and providing annual progress reports to council and mayor as laid out in recommendations 9 and 10. On the next slide, is this the, no, I have the slides in the wrong order, apologies. Okay, so on slide 32, program management and budgeting, the recommendations look for LADOT and CAO to report on the expenditures and encumbrances for all Vision Zero funds, which was alluded to earlier, that we do have that detailed chart ready for that recommendation once adopted. LAPD and LAFD are been asked to report on improved data collection so we can better understand the collisions that are happening in the city. And then recommendation 11 talks about a funding and implementation plan to implement the safety study countermeasures specifically to address pedestrian fatalities. Then we get back into balancing out the E's. So under education, there's a recommendation to report back on a safety education and awareness campaign and encumber $500,000 to get that process started. Enforcement, LAPD has been asked to report back on strategies to prioritize compliance with the traffic laws that contribute most, which was highlighted in the safety study. And for LADOT, LAPD, and the city attorney, this was a recommendation that was previously in there but currently not about red light camera enforcement. Next slide continues on enforcement. Asks the city attorney to update ordinances in respect to AB 2147, Freedom to Walk Act, which I alluded to earlier, and then LADOT to encumber $300,000 for the speed safety camera pilot program, which is something that's already in progress. Going on to the engineering, we're asking to approve and adopt those priority safety corridors mentioned, and also encumber $900,000 for BOE to complete its street design guide manual update, which is a program that's currently in process. On the next slide.
And if you could wrap it, that would be great. I know we're almost at the end of this 40-page presentation, but we have a huge closed session agenda to get through.
Apologies for that. So the next two continue with the recommendations, and we're ready to work on those once adopted by council.
Okay, I just have just a couple of comments and questions, and then I know some of us are on T committee and we all have questions and thoughts, I'm sure. So specifically on the speed cameras and red light cameras, we have, as we know, new state legislation surrounding red light cameras that was just signed by the governor. What is the anticipated timeline for the city of LA to implement this new speed red light camera legislation? Do we have a sense yet of how quickly we can get that up and running?
Yeah, we are waiting for council to ask us to begin that process.
Can we ask you right now?
Yeah, we can begin looking at that and put in the process an RFP to go for that.
Why? Okay. Okay, I understand that the T committee took it out, but people, every single day when I walk my kids to school, someone runs the red light and my kid almost gets hit by a car. People going 50 miles an hour and running the red light. So perhaps we can, I mean, this is perhaps a better conversation for not budget, but if we need to do that, we can do that. I would hope that we can implement this quicker than the speed camera program. It really should not take 5 years to implement these types of new programs that, one, increase safety, and two, provide us with the new revenue streams. It's my understanding that San Francisco implemented theirs in the spring, and they're bringing in so much money that they literally can't spend it all. And they're spending it on the types of things that we all agree we need here and that we obviously don't have the money for as a city. So I'm wondering how far into this 5 years it's going to take before we have a pilot. And why a pilot? Why not deploy speed cameras everywhere? I mean, I understand that you got some direction from the city council to do it within 5 years, but we need this money. And so from a budget conversation, we want all of these things. We want this citywide. A grandmother was just killed crossing the street in my district a couple weeks ago. It's happening everywhere. And I don't know why pilots take so long to get up and running. I can tell you where we should do it in my district. I'm sure Councilmember McCosker can help, look at the high injury network in his district. Why is this taking so long? I guess is my question for DOT. And what do you need from us to go faster?
So I think you're referring to the automated speed enforcement program.
Can you bring that a little closer, please?
Sure. I think you're referring to AB 645, the automated speed enforcement program.
Yeah.
We do have a report coming to City Council in January with the recommended locations. We have a consultant working now who's working with stakeholders to identify.
But why? Okay, I mean, I understand that's a policy question, but really, we can't do anything quickly as a city, and I think that I would rather err on the side of putting them up in the wrong places that aren't the most important places and get them up if it's a pilot, rather than do it perfectly and take 5 years. And in the meantime, our numbers are climbing on on people killed and injured. And I mean, I'm just sort of speaking for myself, but like almost every week someone's hit by a car and killed, it feels like, in our district. So
Totally understand. I've been working on the automated speed enforcement for over a year now. It's very important to me. We're at the point where we're getting ready for that report in January that will have the initial locations that we're proposing. I believe offices will be reached out to soon with some of that information.
and then what's the turnaround on actually getting them up?
We're working now on a piggyback contract, and so ideally, if we're able to get through the procurement process quickly, we can get them started in installation or operating by July of next year.
Wonderful, because that's money that we can then use to
Yes.
fund DOT. And my understanding from Mr. Kivett is that there's going to be some legislation in Sacramento that would expand what those uses, what the money could be used for, so that it would help us with all sorts of roadway improvements that will make our streets safer, because apparently it's a little narrow right now. So just two more questions. When do the CAO and DOT anticipate completing the Vision Zero education campaign, updates to the street design manual, and hiring a consultant for a speed safety system pilot program?
So if approved, yeah, by City Council, then we'll advance that public engagement program. The goal is to bring in a consultant to support that effort. I believe the report back is to be to City Council in 60 days. But we should be able to have a consultant on board to start fiscal year 26, 27, to start that effort.
Okay. And just one last question. This is kind of out of right field, but I'm curious about this. It's my understanding that when LAPD gives a traffic ticket for a moving violation, the state keeps most of that fine. Is that correct? Or is that an urban legend that I just heard? Do we know?
Yeah, it appears we don't have that information about what happens to the money from the moving violation
Okay.
at this time.
All right, then never mind. Okay, for another time. All right, colleagues, questions? Councilmember Blumenfield.
Great, thank you, and I appreciate what you're saying. I planned on a bit of a rant on this as well, and I'll cut my rant down because you've done a good job of it. But traffic safety is really important. I'm not sure this report is all that important because we spend so much time and effort on reports and analysis and methodologies and too little time on making our streets safer. In my district, there are many traffic safety projects that are funded that take so long to implement, such as 7 years to install a traffic signal after we install traffic safety treatments, such as protected bike lanes. We fail to maintain them. We have a bike lane, but then we're never going to sweep it, so it becomes useless. The traffic signal, we approved it, and then every 6 months, the community yells at me for not having it up there, and it's been years, and I have no excuse to tell them. We just move slowly. I'm glad to see that DOT is evaluating Toronto concrete bike lane barriers on a short stretch of bike lane in downtown. But you know, my legislative director, before he began working for me, was chair of the Bicycle Safety Advisory Committee, and even back then, he attended a DOT demo on the armadillo delineators, which are just those little plastic things that could have been putting up yesterday or 10 years ago. Other cities have created low-cost protected bike lanes for so many years using specialized materials like the Toronto barriers, but often things like K-rails or parking stops. We suffer in many ways from paralysis by analysis. And too often, we let the perfect be the enemy of the good, as Voltaire originally said. The bottom line, the report is nice, but without an actual commitment to Vision Zero and traffic safety across DOT, our Public Works Bureau's planning, and especially our budget, it just feels like it's often words. In theory, I understand recommendation 8, which asks for a report back on the methodology that prioritizes investments in historic, a separate issue. On recommendation 8, there's the report asks for a methodology that prioritizes investments in historically disadvantaged communities, which is great. But in practice, because our level of investment is so low, that ultimately when we do that, what it sounds like is that we're basically not going to provide any safety improvements in any other communities. And I just am at a loss on that, because for example, a few years ago, a Reseda High School student, Reseda resident in a low-income area, he was killed while riding his bike, but he was riding his bike in Woodland Hills to get to school. And so what do I tell that mother? That if he'd been killed in Reseda, well, a couple blocks over, we might have tried to do something to make the street safer. But because he was killed in a different neighborhood, we're not going to. That's what it feels like I'm in the position of saying to people. As a council member, many of my constituents have been injured in traffic collisions or have kids who were. Some of them, live in Tarzana and Woodland Hills. Some of them live in different areas. It's not okay for me or for anyone to just tell them that we're never going to get to it. We have to figure out a way to not just prioritize, but to figure out how do we issue programs that are going to, how do we make sure that all of our constituencies are going to be included in traffic safety? It sounds like a rhetorical question, but it's a real question that I need to get answered. I also have a question about recommendation 6, which is AB 2147, which, as you talked about, decriminalize jaywalking unless a pedestrian is not exercising due care. Well, it feels like this recommendation is trying to undo that law, especially in the valley where there's these very long distances between signalized intersections. Many people have no choice but to cross mid-block at unsignalized ratios. So why don't we just have a policy and a public education campaign that tells the person driving the multi-ton vehicle that they need to be careful. They need to yield to defenseless people crossing the street, especially in marked crosswalks. So I want to be sure that this recommendation is aimed at making motorists take responsibility for their actions and not just about blaming vulnerable road users. So I guess the question in that one is, how do we tweak recommendation 6 so that it actually does that? So sort of those are the 2 questions that I have. And then I also have 2 amendments. One is to instruct DOT to report back within 30 days on a plan to implement SB 720 regarding automated traffic safety enforcement, and to provide council within 60 days a draft automated traffic enforcement system impact report. And that's to make sure that we put that back in. And second is to request the mayor and CAO include in the fiscal year 26 budget funding for implementing AB 645 and SB 720. So those are the 2 amendments, and then I have 2 somewhat rhetorical questions, but real questions on how do we tweak recommendation 6, and how do we ensure on recommendation 8 that we include everybody?
Great. I can speak to the recommendation 8 first. We can include in our report back guidance for who we eventually work on with our TOS, our consultant, aimed at that, at educating the drivers and making sure that the work we do in that education campaign aims to reflect exactly what you spoke about. And I think that we do see that as the intent, even if maybe that's not what's in the recommendation right now, but we can include that in our report back. As for recommendation 6, I think that's a more difficult question. We're asking to adopt these priority safety corridors and the methodology that adopted them. That doesn't mean that that's all that LADOT will do. There are always other sources of funds, grants available, ideally automated speed enforcement. That money is for traffic calming, not necessarily just for Vision Zero projects. So some of that money could go to those areas that aren't already represented by funding that comes in the Vision Zero.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that other locations and corridors are covered through other programs, like our Safe Routes to School, our Active Transportation Program, implementation of the networks in the mobility plan. So there are ways for non-priority safety corridors to get attention from the department. Our district engineers as well, they handle constituent requests on a daily basis. So we're not saying this is everything, right? We do have programs that will take a look at other corridors as well.
So I would add just on your question related to recommendation 6, I think the goal here is to provide more education in those areas. In those areas where people, since you can jaywalk, but they're very busy streets, and really to provide more education to pedestrians about there's some certain streets where people should not jaywalk. I think that was the goal of this recommendation, to talk to the city attorney about what is the best way to approach those high injury network, where now you can't find pedestrians for jaywalking, but what is it that you can do to ensure that maybe they're not jaywalking in those places?
I would argue that we get a lot more bang for your buck by educating the people driving the vehicles, the killing machines, rather than the people that are walking in the street.
And just to add to that, the number of people who jaywalk probably hasn't increased by 33% or whatever it is. Like, it's probably been continuous. People jaywalk all the time. What's changed is that everyone's on their phone while they're driving. And so that wasn't, as far as I could tell, included in the presentation today, but I'd be curious, I mean, it seems like post-COVID, everyone's speeding, everyone's in a hurry, everyone's on their phone. And so, you know, that huge increase, pedestrians have been violating the rules around where you can cross the street forever. I don't think there's been an uptick in that. My guess is that people are just on their phones while they're driving. And so to the extent you have some data that backs that up, because it feels, I mean, I'm saying it anecdotally, and I don't know if that's right, but if that could be part of the education and reminding drivers to get off their phones, and then maybe we have more traffic cops giving people tickets for being on their phones while they're driving. I don't know.
So the data, I mean, you could look at the data on slide 12 in terms of between 2014 and 2023, 88% of traffic violations where they could identify who was the responsible party.
Yeah, but that's probably been continuous, right? You've just seen a huge increase, right? Like, people have been engaging in illegal crosswalking behavior and violating the rules as a pedestrian. I don't think there's been a huge uptick in that over the last 5 years. I think what's happened is that people are on their phones, and so instead of being able to brake in time for someone who's violating the rules as a pedestrian, they're getting hit, right? I mean, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Like, suddenly you have all these, like, you know, people, like pedestrians are suddenly behaving differently than they behaved for the last 100 years when they cross the street. That doesn't make sense. So, I mean, I could be completely out to lunch here, but I drive around and everyone is on their phone all the time. And so I just have to assume that, I mean, if you're not on your phone and you're actually paying attention to what you're doing and not triple tasking, and you see someone crossing the street, you're gonna be able to stop in time. I do want to acknowledge that the chair of the Transportation Committee is on this committee, and, you know, Councilmember Blumenfield, you had some amendments to the recommendation coming out of T Committee, and so I want to make sure that our Transportation Chair has an opportunity to weigh in on that before we vote on it if you want to, just because, you know, this is more of a money budget conversation, and you probably spent a great deal of time on the substance of the policy. I mean, and not to put you on the spot, Chair Hutt, but it may be valuable for us to do a joint committee meeting where we can talk about both aspects of these policies, because I will say that San Francisco is bringing in so much money from their speed cameras that they literally can't get it out of the door in time, and so they're going to have to give some of it back to the state, which is part of the reason why there's going to be some legislation that broadens what cities can use the money for. But I think that this could end up being a huge way for us to make our streets much more safe, because we will have money coming back. We will spend it even slower. But anyway, Councilwoman Hutt, whose forehead I can see, but whose face I can't see, is there anything you want to add to the conversation? I don't want to.
No, Madam Chair, I understand the goals. And in this, I've seen other cities move funding faster because they are able to utilize the system. I've seen it in Maryland, I've seen it in Virginia, I've seen it in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But the studying at the time, for me, was different. So I have more information now.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chair.
Councilwoman Hernandez.
Thank you. And I'll start by saying this, that I'm always weary of expanding the law enforcement and carceral system through technology. It's been a lot of the work that I've been doing. So as we talk about this, I'm down to figure out how we make our streets safer. And also, I want to make sure that we're wary and taking the steps and creating the parameters so it's not a tool that is utilized and predominantly impacts Black, brown, and low-income communities. Because traditionally, when we expand the carceral system and law enforcement through technology, and even just a regular carceral system, it's these communities that face the brunt impact. And I know in the past, this type of technology has been used in the city, and for whatever cases, it's not something that's been used anymore. So let's explore with parameters and be cautious. I have a question. And so and then one of the things is, like, my question is related to, as a city, we sometimes over-bureaucratize ourselves and we stand in the way of us being able to deliver on our work. And during Transportation Committee, DOT highlighted the ongoing challenges related to obtaining data from the LAPD. The LAPD doesn't give DOT the data they need directly. What happens is that LAPD transfers that data to the state that then goes to DOT. So I'm gonna, which I thought was wild, like why would you make, we're the same city, you're making the Department of Transportation hop through an unnecessary hoop. So I want to add an instruction that says, instruct the Los Angeles Police Department to transmit the same crash data set simultaneously to the Los Angeles Department of Transportation and to all applicable statewide databases as required, just to remove the barriers for that info.
I'll second.
Thank you. And one thing I also want to say is, I want to remind us in that, and I think we're going to talk about this later in the agenda, but the revenue generated from tickets of cars being parked in bus lanes. We've been having that conversation, right? We were generating revenue. During that conversation, I brought up the point of it only costs us $250,000 for the entire city to put safe street infrastructure on the 50 intersections that we've identified as being prime for street takeovers. This committee chose not to invest that $250,000 into these intersections with those resources. So as we're talking, like, yes, we over-bureaucratize ourselves, but also when we've had opportunities to move the resources where we need it in preventing some of these things from happening, we have, as a body, chosen not to do that. So I'm gonna bring that up as we go, because if new revenue's coming in, we can't just keep putting cameras up. We need to do the infrastructure that's gonna prevent the speeding from happening in the first place. So I just want us to think about that, because pennies when we're talking about the whole thing. So thank you. Thank you.
And I will, to your point about the cameras on the buses, we have that piloting in District 5. It's brought in millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I would love some of that in 5. But these cameras bring in a lot of money. And, you know, there's a downside. We hear from our constituents who are pissed off about a $300 ticket, but it's changing behavior. And as you say, Councilwoman, there's a balance between using technology to enhance public safety and using it as a weapon and helping to create a surveillance state. And so we need to make sure that we have parameters in place so that we're not unduly impacting certain communities. But also, I just would urge that we don't run away from technology that we can use to get people to go the speed limit. And we can do it in a way that doesn't require us to hire more traffic officers, because we know where those places are where people speed, right? I can tell you the 10 places in my district. I'm sure each of us could. And, you know, we can't get them up fast enough. So thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Madam
Okay,
Chair, if I may ask for a second for Councilmember Blumenfield's 2 amendments? Thank you.
Okay, great. So we have 2 amendments. We have an amendment from Councilwoman Hernandez and some amendments from Councilmember Blumenfield. So colleagues, I move that we concur with the Transportation Committee report as amended. And can we vote on all of that together?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Councilmember Yaroslavsky.
Yes.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Aye.
Councilmember Hutt.
Yes.
Councilmember McCosker.
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes.
5 ayes. This item is approved as amended.
Okay, thank you very much, CO and DOT. Look forward to seeing all that progress. Okay, we're going to move now to item 20. Mr. Wexler, would you please read the item?
Item 20, adopted budget recommendation relative to instructing the Office of Finance to report on the city's investments from 2017 to 2025 and related matters, and the Office of Finance report relative to the city's investment portfolio and the feasibility of reallocating a portion of investment returns to offset budgetary obligations.
Welcome. We have our city treasurer here and other Office of Finance staff to answer questions. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I think we're going to go straight into questions, if that's all right. Colleagues, do we need a presentation on this, or can we just jump right in? Okay. This is a question for you, Deanna. Would a special fund review exercise on the city's investment portfolio yield worthwhile savings to the general fund?
So a special fund review could potentially
help identify funds that the city could, unspent funds or funds that may not be needed could be used to offset general fund obligations, but that requires a case-by-case review. It depends on the special fund. Some special funds have restrictions where there's no leeway to do that. And then there are some special funds that you may see throughout budget which are used to help offset general fund obligations. So it really depends. Typically, the city already goes through a process like that. When it goes through the budget process, the annual budget process, departments who administer their special funds are asked to propose what next year's budget would look like for that special fund. As part of that process, they would consider prior year money, unspent money, whether any of that could be used to offset any general fund obligations. So there's already a process in place. I would say that I think the city's financial policies when it comes to encumbrances are certainly more strict when it comes to general fund, and this is completely within the CAO's realm and has nothing to do with Office of Finance. So I'm just speaking out of whatever I know. And so if I'm saying anything incorrectly, CAO's office will jump in. But our general fund encumbrance policy is at the end of the year, funds are automatically unencumbered. And that policy doesn't necessarily exist for special funds. I think there's like a 3-year policy in place. So it allows for a little bit more flexibility for departments when it comes to managing their funds. Hope that makes sense.
No, that's helpful, thank you. Mr. McCosker, you have some questions?
Exactly down that line. I'm not sure I understand that I don't think I heard you say that we do a rigorous special fund analysis on a regular basis where we look at special funds to see whether maybe they're outdated, maybe they could be repurposed, maybe they could be reallocated to something else. Is there, in fact, anything other than just the budget process where we're all looking for money that exists in the city that you know of that does a regular, comprehensive review of special funds?
So what I can tell you is, first I want to at least answer that question from the finance perspective.
Okay.
From the perspective of the investment portfolio, we wouldn't be able to do that analysis because we don't collect and track that kind of information when it comes to the special funds that exist within our portfolio. So we don't know how old that cash is. We don't necessarily, we invest it on a pool basis. And so that's why that individual analysis, budgetary analysis would be necessary, and you'd have to look at each special fund on a case-by-case basis. So it's very much a budget exercise.
Within our fiscal policies, I would imagine.
Say that again?
Within our fiscal policies. It's a fiscal, rather than an annual, right now it's an annual budget, catch as catch can, but if we had a fiscal policy that required this, would it make sense?
I mean, there's a couple of measures that are in place. I mean, it's part of our annual budgetary process. Also, Controller's Office asks departments when it comes to perform certain exercises, annual routine exercises as well. They have a different angle and perspective. It's more from the accounting perspective. Could there be an opportunity for more strict financial policies when it comes to special funds? I would definitely ask CAO to weigh in on that.
Okay, I'm going to cut to the punchline then.
Yeah.
I think the controller does a really nice job, and it appears from my distance that does a nice job of identifying where special funds are. And I appreciate that you keep track of how much they are, and you reinvest the proceeds, the income from special funds. But I'm going to seek an amendment on this item. I'm just speaking to my colleagues now, that we request the CAO and the CLA as appropriate to report on revisions, any recommended revisions to the city's fiscal policies to require departments to conduct regular cyclical reviews of special funds and fund encumbrances. The report would include mechanisms to identify and release outdated or inactive encumbrances. Further, this review should be aligned with the city's budget timeline and process to better support decision-making given our current financial constraints. In other words, let's comb through every single special fund and have departments do that to see whether or not we can repurpose any of these monies or any of them are old or outdated, and to begin using those dollars legally, appropriately, which may have the effect of offsetting general fund dollars or repairing conditions that would otherwise depend upon general fund dollars. That is going to be my amendment for this item.
Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second it.
I don't have other questions for you. Thank you.
Colleagues, anyone else have a question on this item? Councilman Hutt?
Yeah. Hi. Hello. Thank you for being here. Have we ever separated the funds like that? Is that why there's no formula available?
I'm sorry, say that one more time. I didn't.
Have we ever separated out the funding? Is that why there's no formula available?
So the investment portfolio consists of hundreds of different funds. So
Sure.
if it's not general fund, and if it happens to be a special, a fund, a special fund, something non-general fund, then a new fund is created at the direction of the controller's office, and that's how we track all of that money in the investment portfolio. We've always done it that way. And then in terms of just budgetary exercise and whether there's special, whether the city has always put together, done some kind of special fund review as part of the budget process, as part of the annual budget process, also accounting process too. Because departments are the administrators of those funds, and so they're responsible for tracking those expenditures and also making sure that the cash that comes in is balanced with the expenditures.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, any more questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, did you get a second on your amendment?
I did.
Okay, great. Can we vote on this item as amended?
Yes, Madam Chair. Councilmember Yaroslavsky.
Yes.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Aye.
Councilmember Hutt.
Aye.
Councilmember McCosker.
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes.
5 ayes. This item is approved as amended.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. We're going to move now to item 21, called special by Mr. Blumenfield. Mr. Wexler, would you please read the item?
Item number 21, amending motion 22A, Hernandez-Rahman, relative to instructing the Los Angeles Department of Transportation to report on a spending plan for the projected revenue for the bus lane enforcement pilot program and related matters, and amending motion 22B, Park Hutt, relative to instructing the LADOT to report on a spending plan for the city revenue collected from the bus lane violation enforcement program and related matters.
Okay, I'm going to turn over to Councilmember Blumenfield for questions.
Great. Well, it's more of comments and concerns, and which is, I'm opposing this, both of these, but I love everything that you guys are suggesting to spend this money on. These are all things that are huge priorities for me. I've been very active on the transportation side of things, but conceptually, all the other parking revenues that we have, we put in the general fund. That's how it works. Just because this is a new revenue source doesn't mean that we should spend it in a vacuum outside of the budget process. And I get very concerned about that. You talk about bureaucracy, creating bureaucracy and getting in our own way. Every time we take a revenue source and we wall it off, whether it's by ballot box budgeting or whether it's by this council taking an action outside of the budget process, we create a whole new bureaucracy. Now there has to be a bureaucracy to track the small amount of dollars that's going to come from some of this, track it, put it, make sure it's here and there, whereas we should have the priority to make these things a priority when it comes to the budget. We want to have speed hump programs and paint and sign maintenance crews, and we want to spend the new revenue, we should do that. We should do that in the budget process. That's why we sent these amendments back when we were considering the bus program to begin with. I know that they're coming up now to look at it, but nothing has changed. We're still basically walling off funding, treating one source of parking and traffic revenue different than we treat all the others, because it feels good to spend it on the things that we want to spend it on. And I love all, again, like, these are all my priorities, so it's hard for me to oppose this, because these are things that I'm very much supportive of. But I'm supportive of doing this in the budget and being able to say to every other thing that's going to be calling on this money that, no, this is more important. But I cannot support these amending motions that's going to wall off this revenue, create a new bureaucracy to manage this small amount of revenue, wasting a big chunk of that revenue on all the bureaucracy that's going to be involved in tracking it and making sure it gets spent on this, that, and the other thing, when we could just spend it on that when we get to the budget process in this committee. So I'm putting forward and urging everyone to vote no on these.
And I will second that. I will say that most, if not all of this money from these fees is being generated in Council District 5. And we have spent tens, if not 100, I wouldn't say 100, but we spent lots of time with constituents who are very upset about this. And I would like nothing more than to take 10% of this money and have it come back to Council District 5. But I am not going to do that because I agree with Mr. Blumenfield that, and look, there's a tension here because when it goes into the big pot, it gets spent on things that may not be priorities for the majority of the council. And, you know, certain departments eat up so much of our general fund and some departments are scrambling for scraps. And so, and I do recognize we've got two members of the Transportation Committee here. So I will second it because I think as a general matter, and especially as the Budget Committee, we are constantly scrounging for general fund dollars. And we do know that this program is going to be expanded citywide, and so there's going to be a lot more money. And I worry that the more we do this, the more we limit what money can be used for prescriptively. It means that we as a body don't then, during the budget process, get to look holistically at all of our demands on our general fund. The other thing I want to say is if we figure out how to get the speed cameras and the red light cameras up and they start generating a ton of money, we're going to have so much money that we have to spend on these sorts of improvements that we may not need this. And so the more we constrain ourselves now, the harder it might be later to undo it. And I will stop talking, but I'm sure Councilwoman Hernandez, go ahead.
Yes, colleagues. You know, one thing we do in the city is we do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that is what this is here today. Councilmember Blumenfield, you've been here budget cycle after budget cycle. You know it's not easy to move pennies in this budget. So to say that in the future we should do this, we need to prioritize this, yet doing everything to prevent the resource from actually going to these things feels antithetical. And that's why I brought it up earlier of like at some point we need to make the difficult decision because the pilot program is in my district as well. And at some point we need to make the decision, are we going to invest in the infrastructure that's going to prevent violence and collisions? Or are we going to keep saying, well, we're going to bring in revenue and then we'll do that work when we already have the data to show, and in your district, Chairwoman, where the investments need to be made already, you don't need more data to know, anecdotally, but data. So I would say we need to make the investments, and maybe they're not permanent. Maybe you say, for the first 2 years, we're going to focus on Safe Street infrastructure, whatever it is. And then we can reevaluate after those 2 years. But when we talk about moving pennies in this budget, it's the political will of the body. And oftentimes, the political will is not for the investment in the things that we're trying to move in Transportation Committee. So we go around and around and around, and at some point, we just need to do the damn thing and invest in those things. Can't keep talking about it.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, thank you. Councilwoman Hunt.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Hernandez, for sharing. one of the things I think that we should be cognizant of is that it says a report on revenue spending. It doesn't say spend the money. And so we need to be able to look and see what kind of options we have. And that's the goal of these motions, to say, this is a brand-new pilot program, it generates X, and how can we spend it more effectively? In transportation, you know, we don't have enough money for the potholes, the speed humps, the sidewalks in public works. So it is an identifying moment where we can see what's generated and project on how to spend. These are not spending motions that say, well, we're going to put X amount of dollars here right now. It is to see where we can, and that's why both of the motions say report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's a report back.
It's a report back on creating a spending plan for this pot of money. And I don't object to the things that you want to spend the money on. What I object to is spending this pot of money as a unique pot of money. You want to get a report back on the needs of traffic officers, paint, sign, all these great things, I'm with you. But I don't want to report back on spending a pot of money that should be part of the general fund. Because the general fund, we're going to have to make these choices. And I mean, I agree with you that council hasn't always done what I wanted it to do priority-wise. I don't get my way, but I don't think it's fair for me to get my way by, you know, even though I actually, again, like, I think I prioritize these things probably more than most people on this council. And so it's odd for me to be in the position of arguing against it. It's more of a form. And in some ways, since I'm not going to be here in future years, it's my last year, I'd be better off, you know, doing these kind of motions on every little pot of funds to make sure things are the way I want it to be spent for the next 20 years by locking all these things down. But from a process perspective, I just think that ends up creating more bureaucracy, handcuffs us in terms of decisions, and is not good policy and good government. So I can't support it. If it was just talk about what's needed for, you know, report back on what's needed for all of these things, I'm with you. But if it's specifically a plan to spend a pot of money that should be in the general fund and to segregate that funds, I can't support that.
It's just a report back.
It's a report back on spending a segregated funds. If it was just a report back on what's needed, I would support it. But if it's a report back on how we segregate the fund, you know, how we spend the segregated funds, then I mean, you all may vote for it against, you know, but I sort of, it's a philosophical thing. It's why on certain measures, you know, even on ULA, when that was not ULA, the HLA, you know, I really loved what it was promoting, but I had issues with the way that it was locking down the funds. So I had
There was no funds with the HLA.
The ballot measure.
Yeah, there's no funds. That's why we can't implement it.
Well, the idea of it is locking down funds, and it's sort of so for me it's philosophical in terms of how we approach this. Even though, again, I love all these categories. I'd love to force us to spend more money on all these things. I just don't think this is the right way to do it.
Jerome,
Councilman.
if I could just ask Iris's body to just let us get the report backs and see what that information shows. We have the STAP program here in the city that generates revenue. That funding goes into a special account for infrastructure. So it's not like we haven't done it before. It would just be great if we could have the information, at least to make a better decision instead of just anecdotal.
Sure. Can I ask a question? How was this, and this is amending motion from you and Councilwoman Rahman and Hutt. How did you land on these categories? So for example, if we wanted to add in crossing guards, because that was a thing that, you know, we talked about at length in budget, and, you know, is that a thing that we could add into this to see what, like, if we take this program citywide and it starts generating 10, 15 times more money, is that?
So I'm completely open to that. The point is to see really what's coming back, how it could be used. If crossing guards is an issue because the street is ours and we need to cross children, why not figure out how we can implement something in that space? But, it's so that we can have options. It's not to shut down any options.
Yes, and Chairwoman, that list of items came directly from conversations with DOT.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
true.
so I guess, I feel like I'm you, Councilmember Blumenfield, splitting the baby here, but, I guess one thing is, as long as we're preserving the flexibility, this is just a report back, but, we know how report backs gain momentum, and then it feels like if you're voting against something that seems like it's all good things, then you're a bad person. I mean, what I would want to sort of confirm is that if we do find new streams of money, say from red light cameras, speed cameras, the STAP program, there's potentially a lot of money coming in for these sorts of DOT improvements and staffing, especially if we get some state law changes in Sacramento that allow us to broaden what we use some of this money for, just to make sure that we're not locking ourselves in perpetuity. And, I think I'm okay with a report back, but I also think that we as the Budget Committee can be driving this conversation through the budget process as well, and saying in the budget, there's this much money that came in through this program, and in next year's budget, or in the budget in the spring, we're going to allocate all of that money for these things without handcuffing ourselves to have to do it on a going forward basis.
Yeah, the report backs will allow us to do that.
Right.
Well, Madam Chair, on item number 20, it says, the Office of Finance report relative to the city's investment portfolio and the feasibilities of reallocating a portion of investment returns to offset budgetary obligations. So there's a option that they're looking for in item number 20 to move money a different way. And it's just a report back. That's all. It's the same thing we're asking for. It's like, how much is it? What can we do with it? How can it be relatable? I think there's an example right before.
I mean, if we take this to the next extreme, let's look at every parking revenue. Let's look at all of the revenues that we get and start spending them independently of the budget process.
But we're not
What about the parking meters? Like, maybe those parking meters should be spent on parking-related things. And,
But we're not spending. We just want to report back. And when we go in budget season and we look at how much money each department has, they tell you how they're spending. And we ask them in a grueling, 10-day meeting, report back on this spending. I don't think this is any different. Pardon me.
Again, to me, it feels different because we're segregating a revenue source that for all the other parking revenues, traffic revenues, we don't segregate. The only reason we're doing it for this is because it's new. It's a pilot, but it's hopefully not going to be a pilot for very long, that we're going to grow this. But anyway, I get it. Again, in some ways, I hope I lose, and then we spend money on all these things, because these are things that I really like. But just philosophically, I have trouble with it.
I'm going to make your day. Call the question.
All right, so should we vote? There's two amendments. I think maybe we should vote separately on the amendments and then on the overall thing.
Why can't we take them together?
Because I think he wants to vote for one but not the other
I'm going to vote no on both.
amendments
Yeah.
and the underlying,
Well,
whole thing?
What's the underlying thing?
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
you're right, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Okay, so let's vote on this as amended for a report on a spending plan.
And for the record, that's to amend this item for report back?
No, it amends it, it's amended by Park Hut to state, it includes some amendments, restoration of traffic officer positions. It has some specific language about what would be in that spending plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And would you like to vote on the item?
As amended.
Got it, okay. And would that be a entire vote on the item? Or would you like to bifurcate the two
Let's vote on
amended
the whole thing as
motions?
amended.
Okay, we'll call the vote. Councilmember Yaroslavsky,
No.
Councilmember Blumenfield,
No.
Councilmember Hutt,
Yes.
Councilmember McCosker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Yes.
This item is approved as amended.
Okey doke. Thank you. We've concluded all of our open session items. Can we please prepare the room for closed session?
Madam Chair, if I may, call the roll.
Yes, on item 13.
Thank you. Councilmember Yaroslavsky?
Here.
Councilmember Bloomfield? Councilmember Hutt?
Here.
Councilmember McCosker? Present. Councilmember Hernandez? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, I ask that we vote on item 13. I recommend we approve it as amended in closed session to delete item 6. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Yaroslavsky?
Yes.
Councilmember Bloomfield? Councilmember Hutt?
Aye.
Councilmember McCosker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez? Yes. 5 ayes. This item is approved as amended.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clerk. Are there any other items on the desk?
The desk is clear, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, before we conclude our meeting, I want to briefly acknowledge our CAO, Jacob Wexler, who's been an incredible asset to our committee the past few years. Congratulations on the promotion. We wish you well as an ACAO. I know you have a standing invitation to come visit us anytime in this committee. Colleagues, that concludes our agenda. With that, have a good evening, everyone. We'll see you all next week on December 9th at 3:30 in council chambers for a special Budget and Finance Committee meeting, last one of the year. Thank you so much.